today we look at different religious facts about Christianity and determine whether they're accurate or not. Thank you so much for watching, and I really hope you enjoy this video. Alright, let's type in this prompt into ChatGPT. Write me a religious fact about Christianity and let me guess whether it is accurate or not. Here we go. First one. What does he say? Oh, I spelled Christianity wrong. Whoops. Here's a religious fact. Here's a religious fact for you to guess. Fact: the Bible has 73 books in total. Do you think that's accurate or not? Leave a comment down below what you think. In each question, just leave a comment down below. This is like a quiz for you guys, and I'll love to see how much you got right. But this one, I'm saying is false. Alright, this one is false because and write down below what you think before I told you to answer. What you think, was it yes or not? Because here's the thing: the Bible has two testaments, right? The Bible has two testaments. There's the Old Testament and the New Testament, right? The Old Testament is the history leading up to Jesus and prophecies testifying about Jesus. The New Testament is what happens after all those prophecies and the fulfillment of those prophecies when Jesus actually comes. All the history leading up to Jesus is over, and now we get to Jesus' time, leading to AD. So think of the Old Testament being BC and the New Testament being AD. And Revelation chapter 22, it's talking about the new heaven and the new earth. That's like the new that's like the new century from the 1900s to the 2000s. Right? Think of it. So that's a comparison. But what we're saying here is the Bible is broken up into two testaments, but there's not 73 books in total. The answer to this is 66. I thought we were going to start with an actual accurate one, but I guess we're not. The Bible has 66 books. Right? The Bible has 66 books. And the Old Testament has 39 books, and the New Testament has 27. So this one actually is false. So we type in that's false. You're right. The fact that fact is indeed false for most versions of the Bible. Here's basically the ChatGPT summarizes what I just said. The Protestant Bible typically has 66 books. So the Protestant Bible is basically the Holy Bible. Protestant also means holy. The Protestant Bible typically has 66 books, 39 in the Old Testament and 27 in the New Testament. However, the Catholic Bible includes some additional books, bringing the total to 73, adding the Deuterocanonical books. You don't even know what that word means. Like Tobit and Judith, which are not included in the Protestant Bible. So the Protestant Bible is like the Christian Bible, the Holy Bible. The Catholic Bible is actually... So the Catholic Bible is different. The Catholic Bible, though, is still talking about prophecies. It's still talking about the same thing the Protestant Bible does. The Catholic Bible is the same Old Testament as the Protestant Bible, but adds the Book of Maccabees at the end, makes the total 41. And then there are some more books. Well, the Book of Maccabees, it talks about the years that God was silent, the silent years of God between the Book of Malachi and Matthew, which the Protestant Bible actually does not explain, or does not tell us. And then the Catholic Bible also has books in the New Testament, so that brings the total to 73. So this is technically actually accurate too. So type in ChatGPT, does that mean that the above statement is true too? Does that mean that the above statement is true too? Good question. Technically, yes. The statement is true if referring to the Catholic Bible. Like you said, that's basically what I was thinking. Which does contain 73 books. However, since Christianity includes many denominations, it would generally be false for Christians as a whole, because the Protestant Bible, the Holy Bible, the version most widely used in America and all the whole world has 66 books. So, technically it's true, but it's false. So, the original statement was slightly misleading since it didn't specify a particular Christian tradition. So, if it said, in any denomination, is there 73 books in the Bible, then that answer would have been true. But we gotta say this one's false. We gotta say this one's false because, it didn't state the denomination, and for us, if it doesn't state the denomination, we're just gonna assume it's Christianity, okay? Because we are part of the Christianity denomination. So, let's move on to the next one. Let's copy and paste this into the message. Here's another fact for us to guess. So this one's a little harder. So fact: Christians celebrate Easter to mark the resurrection of Jesus Christ, which, according to tradition, occurred 3 days after his crucifixion on Good Friday. Is that accurate or not? Leave a comment down below. What do you think the answer is? The answer is true. Right. So Holy Week starts with Palm Sunday on Sunday. Then it goes. Skips Monday and Tuesday. Then it goes nothing on Wednesday. That's Holy Wednesday, which really nothing happened on that day. Thursday, which is Maundy Thursday, the institution of the Lord's Supper. Friday is Good Friday, the day Jesus died. Saturday is Holy Saturday. Sunday is Easter. Thinking Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 3 days, but not including Friday, Sunday. That's Saturday and Sunday. That's 2 days. Let's see what ChatGPT has to say about this. Is this false? Can you say? So let's go. Can you say that this fact is false because it is only Saturday, Sunday, and you don't include Good Friday? Let's see what it says. Make this more detailed. I wanted a more detailed answer. Okay, so this is what he originally said. This is what ChatGPT originally said. That's an interesting thought, and so it's an interesting thought that that I had put. However, traditionally the 3 days includes Good Friday, which is the day that Jesus was crucified, and Saturday, the time that he was in the tomb, the whole 24 hours, and then Sunday, the day that he rose. This way of counting doesn't require 3 full 24-hour days, because Jesus did not die midnight on Friday and rise midnight on Monday. It's not 24-hour days, so Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Friday to Saturday, Saturday to Sunday, Sunday to Monday. It's not 3 days. Jesus rose on Sunday and not Monday. So if it's midnight on Monday, that would be considered Monday, and Jesus did not rise on Monday. But even that, but following that question, but following that thought, Jesus rose Sunday morning. It's not Monday. Jesus rose Sunday morning. That's why we have Easter Sundays. That's why we have Easter Sundays, and that's why we have Easter worship. And that's why we have Easter. That's why we have Easter worship services, and that's a tongue twister. Early, like candlelight services, or sorry, like sunrise services, and then 2 services usually on Sundays, because Jesus rose on that we usually do on then the 2 services that we usually do on Sundays, because Jesus rose in the morning. So this way of counting doesn't require 3 full 24-hour days, but instead it follows the ancient Jewish custom where any part of a day counts as a whole day. So back in the Jewish custom, if you have at least 1 hour, or like even 1 hour of a day, that counts as a full day. So part of the day on Friday, all day Saturday, so that day in America counts as 1 day, and then Sunday in the morning, so that counts as 3 days. So that's basically what it means. And so the original fact is considered accurate because 3 days is symbolic and aligns with how days were traditionally understood at the time. And this is the more detailed answer that I want ChatGPT to specify, that I wanted to specify on, or that I wanted it to. This is a more detailed answer that I wanted it to focus on, because it's missing some parts. So certainly, here's a more detailed explanation. So it is the traditional Christian belief is that Jesus was crucified on Good Friday and rose from the dead on Easter Sunday. That's what we believe. But when Christians refer to the 3 days between his crucifixion and resurrection, it reflects an ancient Jewish way of counting days, where any part of a day is counted as a full day. So we just talked about that Jewish custom. Back then, Jewish custom. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday were 3 days because it was part of a day. In this reckoning, Good Friday is counted as day 1, which is the day that Jesus was crucified and died. Saturday is day 2, which is the Sabbath day when Jesus' body remained in the tomb. So that Holy Saturday was also known as the Sabbath day. And then Easter Sunday is day 3, which is the day that Jesus rose, which is the day of Jesus' resurrection, which is celebrated as Easter Sunday. So although the time period isn't 3 full 24-hour days like American customs are, it's understood symbolically with each part day counting as a whole. This 3-day framework fulfills Jesus' prediction that he would be raised on the 3rd day, a prophecy that was found in multiple gospel accounts. So conclude with a detailed answer. Answering the fact above. Answering the fact above. So this is the answer to that. So the original fact that Christians celebrate Easter to mark the resurrection of Jesus Christ, which according to Christian traditions occurs 3 days after his crucifixion on Good Friday, is indeed accurate. So it is indeed accurate. Moving on to the third one. I'm just going to keep spelling it wrong. It's fine. Ooh, this is a good one. Here's a new fact for you to guess. Write your answer down in the comments below. The term Christian was first used to refer to followers of Jesus in the city of Jerusalem. Ooh, okay. What do you think, guys? What do you think? Do you think that's accurate, or do you think it's not? Write your answers down in the comments. I'll give you a second. Okay, here's what I think. I think that's false. And here's why. I think that's false. It's not accurate. It's because the term that referred to followers of Jesus in the city of Jerusalem, that's called disciples. Jesus always refers to Peter, James, and John, and the other 9 as disciples, the disciples of Jesus, or one of the 12, or the 12, or apostles. Paul becomes an apostle. Christians are those who are being converted from unbelievers to believers. Those are the believers that Paul or Peter or John or the writers of the New Testament are sharing the message too. So it's not those who follow Jesus, it's those who are converted. And I think I might have read that wrong, but let's see what ChatGPT says. Give me a detailed answer. Give me a detailed answer. Yeah, okay, so this is false. And we have a passage. Awesome. Okay, so that statement. So this statement is false. The term Christian was actually first used in the city of Antioch, not Jerusalem. Okay, but what I was saying was, followers of Jesus in the city of Jerusalem. But here's what ChatGPT says. Let's go back to the book of Acts, chapter 11, which states, "And when Barnabas, had found him, Paul, he brought him to Antioch. So for a whole year, Barnabas and Saul met with the church and taught great numbers of people. The disciples were called Christians first at Antioch." So, in this city, which is located in modern-day Turkey, was an early center for the spread of Christianity and became a prominent location for followers of Jesus after persecution began in Jerusalem that causing believers to scatter. So believers scatter, right? Believers are scattering everywhere. Now, the term Christian likely originated as an external label that's possibly used by others in Antioch to identify followers of Christ. Christians meaning followers of Christ or belonging to Christ. Over time, Christians adopted the term themselves, embracing it as a distinct identity that set them apart from other groups. So, I don't know. Let's put what I was thinking. But isn't it the fact that when it says that when the prompt says Jesus with followers, of Jesus, doesn't it mean the 12? Doesn't it mean the 12? And here's what ChatGPT says. When I says, but isn't the fact that when the prompt says followers of Jesus doesn't it mean the 12? Here is what he says. And so here's what ChatGPT says. I don't think ChatGPT is a he, but here's what ChatGPT says. That's a thoughtful question. When we refer to the followers of Jesus in this context, it means all believers or disciples of Jesus and not just the 12 apostles. Okay, so thanks, ChatGPT. It's saying everyone who is converted from unbelief to believing in Jesus, all Christians in the Christian church, and not just the 12 apostles. Okay, I read that wrong. Thank you, ChatGPT. Thank you, ChatGPT. I read that wrong. So the term Christian in Antioch refers to the broader group of believers who follow Jesus' teachings, which by that time include both Jewish and Gentile converts who believed in Jesus as the Messiah. By the time this term was first used in Antioch, the Christian community had grown far beyond the original 12 apostles, so just way beyond the 12 apostles. It's branching out from the 12 apostles who were teaching the Word of God to those people, which make it branch out. So the 12 apostles are in the center. The 12 were currently central figures in the early church, but the followers of Jesus, those people who were spread out, those who made the diagram spread out, included many others who spread his teachings, formed communities, and worshipped together. Now, from each of those bubbles, from the 12 apostles, it branches out. From each of those bubbles, it's branching out from there. We're now our own center of that diagram, and now we're branching out to tell other people, and they're branching out to tell that other people, and soon that diagram is going to fill the whole earth, because your children are spreading their diagram with their children, and those children spreading their diagram with other children. So while the 12 apostles were among the earliest followers, the term Christian in Antioch was likely applied to this wider community of believers rather than just the 12. So on to our fourth fact. And now this leads to a question. This actually is a great follow-up question. Put your answer down below. The Apostle Paul was one of the original 12 disciples chosen by Jesus. Do you think that's accurate or not? Put your answer down below. Because my answer is false. Because here are the original 12 disciples of Jesus. I said, give me the original 12 disciples of Jesus. Here it is. The original 12 disciples, also known as the 12 apostles chosen by Jesus, are Peter, James, Simon Peter, James, son of Zebedee, John, the brother of James, John, the brother of James, the son of Zebedee, Andrew, Peter's brother, Philip, Bartholomew, also called Nathaniel, Matthew, the tax collector, Thomas, also called Didymus, James, the son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, also called Lebbaeus or Judas, son of James, Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who later betrayed Jesus. Those are the 12. And after Judas Iscariot's betrayal and death, here's the 13th disciple of Jesus, Matthias, who was chosen to replace him in Acts chapter 1, verses 15 through 26, but he wasn't one of the original 12. So to answer your previous question, we're not there yet. So those are the 12. So do you think that Paul was one of the original 12 disciples chosen by Jesus? Based on that list, no. The answer is false. And here's the reason. Jesus said, ChatGPT says, to answer your previous question, the Apostle Paul was not one of the original 12 disciples. So it's false. He came later and was called by Jesus on the road to Damascus after Jesus' resurrection. Paul played a critical role in spreading Christianity and wrote many of the letters, also known as epistles in the New Testament. But he wasn't part of the 12 who followed Jesus during his earthly ministry. So that's the answer. Make this more detailed. Make this more detailed. Oh, uh-oh. Whoopsies. Let's do this. I did not mean to write all that. I said make this more detailed and elaborate. Make this more detailed and elaborate. Okay. Come on, ChatGPT. Let's refresh the page. ChatGPT should work now. Don't care. Let's try this again. Oh, perfect. Okay. So the Apostle Paul was originally named Saul of Tarsus and was not one of the original 12 disciples chosen by Jesus during his earthly ministry. He actually came after Jesus and never followed Jesus. He never saw Jesus personally. He never saw Jesus physically. While the 12 disciples were personally selected by Jesus from among his followers, Paul's role in the early Christian movement came after Jesus' death, resurrection, and ascension. So this came after ascension. Paul started preaching a few chapters into Exodus, which was a while after the ascension of Jesus. So Paul's background in early life, which initially Paul was hostile to Christianity. He was hostile. He didn't like Christianity. He wanted to persecute Christians. He wanted to persecute the Christian domination. He saw the movement as a threat to Jewish tradition. He thought Christianity was a threat to Jewish tradition, to the Jews, and the authority of the law. So Paul actively persecuted early Christians, approving of the stoning of Stephen, who was a Christian, who summarized the Old Testament prophecies. And Paul was like, "I don't want to hear it. I'm stoning you to death." So he stoned Stephen to death. And then a few chapters later, as he was traveling through Damascus, Paul had a dramatic transformation that came on the road to Damascus. As he was traveling to arrest Christians, as he was traveling to arrest and persecute more Christians, a blinding light suddenly shone around him, and he fell to the ground. He heard a voice asking, "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?" Acts 9:4. And of course, the voice was that of Jesus Christ, who had been resurrected and was now speaking directly to Paul. So this moment marked the beginning of Paul's calling, and Jesus told Paul that he was chosen to be a vessel to spread his message to the Gentiles, non-Jews. So after this encounter with Jesus, Paul was blinded for 3 days, and a Christian named Ananias prayed for him. So you might know who Ananias is. He's a familiar character, and not the person at the time when Jesus was being circumcised at the temple. And a Christian named Ananias prayed for him, restoring his sight. So it was at this moment that Saul changed his name and became known as Paul, which is basically just changing a letter in his name, and it rhymes, which marked the start of his new identity as a follower of Jesus, but not one of the original followers of Jesus, not an apostle, and an apostle of the church, or not, so not a disciple, but an apostle. His dramatic conversion story serves as a powerful testimony of the transforming power of Jesus Christ. So then Paul's ministry and contribution to Christianity, what was his contribution? Well, his contribution was that unlike the original 12 apostles who were with Jesus throughout his earthly ministry, Paul's ministry began after Jesus had ascended to heaven. So he wasn't with Jesus, and he didn't have Jesus help him and give him the words to say there publicly. But from heaven, Jesus gave him the words to say. That nevertheless, Paul came to be regarded as one of the most influential figures in the spread of Christianity, particularly among the Gentiles. So the Gentiles, he was famous to the Gentiles. Whenever he walked into a Gentile city, whenever he walked into a city full of Gentiles, he's famous because he was one of the most influential figures in to the Gentiles, who spread Christianity. So he had a lot of influence, and he has a lot of influence nowadays when we preach Paul's messages. Paul's extensive missionary journeys took him throughout the Roman Empire, including cities in modern-day Turkey, Greece, and Italy. Italy, because Rome is in Italy, that makes sense. And he preached the gospel, planted churches, and established Christian communities, becoming one of the primary architects of Christianity's expansion beyond its Jewish roots. And that made him write the epistles, which are Paul's letters. Paul's letters to the Corinthians in Corinth, and to the Ephesians in Ephesus, Galatians in Galatia, Philippians in Philippi, Colossians in Colossae, First Thessalonians to the people of the Thessalonians, the people in Thessalonica, all these people. And so one of Paul's most significant contributions to Christianity was his writings. He authored 13 letters. So he wrote 13 letters that are now part of the New Testament. So 13 out of the 27 books, that is almost half of the books. That is about half of the books in the New Testament he wrote. So these letters, so that's how he's, one of the reasons why he's most influential is because he writes 50% of the New Testament, and the New Testament is something we take to heart a lot. We take to heart a lot of Paul's writings. These letters were written, though, to the early Christian churches or individuals that to encourage them, to teach them, and to address various theological and ethical issues to them facing the early Christian community. Some of his most well-known epistles include Romans, which is a theological treatise on salvation by faith. 1st and 2nd Corinthians, which is a letter to the church in Corinth addressing various problems within the church, including divisions and immorality. Galatians, which includes a letter focusing on justification by faith and defending the gospel against legalistic teachings, which is different from Romans because it's a theological treatise. Romans is a theological treatise. Galatians is a letter focusing on justification by faith and not salvation by faith like Romans is. Ephesians, which is a letter discussing the unity of the church in Christ and the spiritual blessings believers have. Philippians, which is a letter of encouragement and joy despite suffering. 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, which is a letter to the church in Thessalonica about the second coming of Christ and Christian conduct. So it's talking about the second coming of Jesus at the end of the world. 1st and 2nd Timothy and Titus. So 1st and 2nd Timothy and Titus both, I guess, teach the same thing. Which are pastoral letters giving instructions on church leadership and Christian living. So Timothy and Titus are two pastors of churches, and so Paul is giving them advice on how to lead a church and how to live a life full of how to live a life as a Christian. And so Paul's letters shaped much of Christian theology, particularly the understanding of salvation, grace, and the role of the law. He also provided practical teachings on Christian living, ethics, and the organization of the early church. So, conclusion, here's the answer. In summary, while Paul was not one of the original 12 disciples who walked with Jesus during his earthly ministry, his conversation on the road to Damascus and subsequent apostolic calling were critical to the spread of Christianity. Paul's extensive missionary journeys, his theological writings, and his unique apostleship make him one of the most significant figures in the history of Christianity that's particularly in reaching the Gentiles and shaping Christian doctrine. So the answer is it's false. Let's go all the way back up and get and now we're going to make it harder. Write me a hard religious fact about Christianity and let me guess whether it's accurate or not. A hard religious fact. Let's make this a little harder. What does ChatGPT say for our first hard fact? So here's a challenging religious fact for you to guess. Comment down below. It might take you some time because it's challenging. The fact is that the Gospel of Mark is believed to have been the first gospel written, and it was written in Greek, not Hebrew or Aramaic. That's challenging because I don't really know a lot about the Gospel of Mark. I don't really read Mark as much as the other three Gospels. But do you think that's accurate or not? Comment down below. I'll give you some time. So, I asked ChatGPT to give me some help to start answering this prompt, and this isn't cheating. This is not cheating. So, it said, sure, let's break this down into parts to help guide you. So, first, let's talk about the Gospel of Mark. Look, in general, the Gospel of Mark in general. And so, the Gospel of Mark is. Let's talk about the Gospel of Mark in this context. So the Gospel of Mark is one of the 4 Gospels in the New Testament, right? Alongside Matthew, Luke, and John. And is the shortest of the 4 Gospels by a few chapters, and is traditionally attributed to John Mark, who's thought to have been a companion of both Peter and Paul. John Mark was not a disciple of Jesus with Peter and Paul, or an apostle of Jesus like Peter and Paul, with Peter and Paul. But It was the first gospel. It was the first gospel written. What does the prompt say? The Gospel of Mark is believed to have been the first gospel written. That's the first part. The first gospel written. So that part is true. It is the first gospel written. Because scholars generally agree that Mark was the earliest gospel written. It is usually dated to around 60, 70 years after Jesus, after Jesus' birth. And this is based on internal evidence, like its lack of references to the destruction of the Jerusalem temple, which occurred in 70 A.D., which is 7 years after the birth of Jesus. And that's suggesting it was written before that event. So Mark was written before the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. Now the Gospels of Matthew and Luke were written later, after 10 to 20 years after. Thought to have been written later, around 20, 30 years after the Gospel of Mark. Which is 80 to 90 years after the birth of Jesus, and they are believed to have used Mark as a source, along with other sources such as Q, which is a hypothetical collection of Jesus' sayings. And so the first part is true, that it was the first gospel written. What about if it was written in Greek, not Hebrew or Aramaic? And that part is true as well, because it was written in Greek. The Old Testament was written in Greek. The New Testament was written in Hebrew, but Mark was written in Greek. Oh no, the New Testament was written in Greek. Old Testament was written in Hebrew. My bad. Most scholars agree that Mark was written in Greek, the common language of the Eastern Mediterranean at the time, so this is true. This would have made it accessible to a broader audience, especially considering that many of the early Christians were in Gentile, non-Jewish communities. The New Testament is predominantly written in Greek, so that part is true as well. So the whole prompt is true, and with a few portions, such as some sayings of Jesus, or what Jesus said, is potentially in Aramaic or Hebrew, because that's what they spoke in the New Testament. But Greek is the primary language used for the Gospels, and so Hebrew or Aramaic, it's Aramaic, because Jesus and his follower and many of his followers likely spoke Aramaic in the New Testament or in the Gospels, especially in the Gospel of Mark, and Semitic language closely related to Hebrew in daily life. Oh, that's Aramaic. The Gospel of Mark itself is generally accepted as having been written in Greek rather than Hebrew or Aramaic. This is because the structure and vocabulary of the text fit the conventions of Koine Greek, the common Greek of the time, which was the lingua franca of the Roman Empire. So now you have a bit more context to think through the fact. Do you think the Gospel of Mark was the first Gospel written in Greek? I think yes. Comment down below more. Explain yourselves a little bit more. Is this accurate or is it not? But let me ask ChatGPT. If Aramaic is like Hebrew, then is the Gospel of Mark both written in Aramaic and Hebrew? So I asked ChatGPT, if Aramaic is like Hebrew, then is the Gospel of Mark both written in Aramaic and Hebrew? And here's what ChatGPT said. It is very detailed. The Gospel of Mark was not written in both Aramaic and Hebrew. Rather, it was written in Greek. But when Jesus and his followers spoke Aramaic, and Aramaic is like Hebrew, I guess you could say it was written in Hebrew as well. But it was mostly written in Greek. Because Greek was the common language of the Eastern Mediterranean during the time it was written, which was around 60 to 70 years after the birth of Jesus. So why Greek? Not Aramaic or Hebrew. Number one was Greek was the common language. Like I said, Greek was the common language of the Eastern Mediterranean during the time that Mark was written. Because during the time of the early church, the predominant language of the Mediterranean world was Greek, specifically Koine Greek, a common language that was widely spoken across the Roman Empire. It was also spoken widely across the Roman Empire, so I guess that's another reason. This made Greek a natural choice for writing the Gospels, as it allowed the teachings of Jesus and the events of his life to be accessible to a wider audience, including Gentile converts to Christianity. But Aramaic and Hebrew influenced the Gospels. Because, and here's what ChatGPT said about that. Jesus and his disciples likely spoke Aramaic in their daily lives, as Aramaic was the common language in Judea at that time. So Greek was the common language of the Roman Empire, or Aramaic was the common language of Judea at that time, which is Jews. That's why Jesus and his disciples speak Aramaic, because they're Jews. Hebrew, on the other hand, was mostly used in religious and scholarly contexts, such as in the reading of the Torah. The Torah is the first 5 books of the Bible: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, books the books that Moses wrote. Some parts of the Gospel of Mark contain Aramaic phrases or words. For example, Talitha Kum, meaning "little girl, I say to you, get up," in Mark 5:41. That's a phrase that is written in Aramaic, and it's preserved to give an authentic flavor of the language Jesus might have used. However, these are not indications that the whole Gospel is written in Aramaic or Hebrew. It was written in Greek, remember. They're just specific phrases in the original language of Jesus that were retained in the Greek text. And then number 3 is influence of Hebrew scriptures, the Old Testament scriptures. While the Gospel of Mark was written in Greek, it is heavily influenced by the Hebrew scriptures, which is the Old Testament. Mark draws on the prophecies and writings of the Old Testament to present Jesus as the fulfillment of those prophecies. This reflects a deep connection to Jewish traditions and the Hebrew Bible, but the actual text of Mark itself is in Greek. So Mark is written in Greek. So in summary, that prompt is true. One more. Let's do an extremely hard one. Extremely hard religious fact about Christianity, and let me guess whether it's accurate or not. So I said, write me an extremely hard religious fact about Christianity, and let me guess whether it's accurate or not. So here's an extremely challenging religious fact for you to guess. This is the fact. You might need some time with this. It's okay if you do it after the video, because this is challenging. Oh my goodness. I'm gonna need some help with this. Help me, ChatGPT. The fact is, the Apostle Matthew, traditionally credited with writing the Gospel of Matthew, was originally a zealot before becoming a disciple of Jesus. Do you think that's accurate or not? Comment down below. I might need some help by my pastor with this one. This is challenging. Oh my goodness. Help me, ChatGPT. Help me, ChatGPT. It says, certainly. Let's break this fact down. The Apostle Matthew. Let's get a background of the Apostle Matthew. This is the final one, by the way. According to the tradition and the New Testament, Matthew, which is also called Levi, was one of the 12 apostles of Jesus. Matthew is traditionally credited with writing the Gospel of Matthew, though modern scholars debate this authorship, and some argue the Gospel is written by a community or someone else using Matthew's name. Matthew's occupation as a tax collector. That doesn't answer the question, though, so it's not false right away. Don't put false down, because it might not be false. This is Matthew's occupation was tax collector. It didn't say what was Matthew's occupation. The question was Matthew a zealot? The Gospel of Matthew, which is in Matthew 9:9, and the Gospel of Mark 2:14, tell us that Matthew was a tax collector before he became a disciple of Jesus. Still do not put false. It is not false. Tax collectors were often viewed negatively by Jews at the time because they worked for the Roman occupiers and are often seen as corrupt or dishonest. Zealots. Now let's get the definition of zealots. The zealots were a group of Jewish revolutionaries who were fiercely opposed to Roman rule in Judea. This is like the British in the American Revolution, right? They were known for their militant approach to resisting Roman occupation, often using violence and guerrilla tactics. The zealots are mentioned in the New Testament in relation to Simon the Zealot, which was one of the apostles. Simon the Zealot was likely part of this radical movement before following Jesus. So was Matthew a zealot? Was Matthew a friend of Simon the Zealot? Was Matthew a zealot? At the end of number 4, we will know if it's true or false. Was Matthew a zealot? The answer is. So the claim and the fact you're saying is that Matthew was originally a zealot. This is not supported by the New Testament or historical sources. Don't put false down. Matthew is referred to as a tax collector, not a zealot. There's no evidence in the Bible or early Christian writings that suggest Matthew was involved in the zealot movement. In fact, being a tax collector would have placed him in direct opposition to the zealots, who hated Roman collaborators like tax collectors. So why is this fact difficult? Why is this fact difficult to understand? It's because of the potential confusion between Matthew and Simon the Zealot, both of whom were apostles. They were not friends, or they were not friends because they were zealots. The fact might try to confuse the identity of the two. You could get confused with both. You could get confused with the two. There's no biblical evidence linking Matthew to the zealot movement. However, don't put false down yet. The zealot movement itself is an important part of the historical context in which Jesus and his apostles lived. So it's easy to mix up the details. So the conclusion: is the fact accurate or not? The statement that Matthew was originally write true or false down based on the bullet points. The statement that Matthew was originally a zealot is not accurate. It is false because while Simon was a zealot, Matthew was a tax collector and not a zealot. So the New Testament does not associate him with the zealot movement. So the answer is false. Give me an answer to the prompt above. Yeah, give me an answer to the prompt above. Give me an answer. Give me an answer to the prompt above. The statement that Matthew was originally a zealot is not accurate, and we're not going to go through the reasons because we already went through it. So therefore, when I said therefore, because when I said when it means there when there's a therefore, that means that this is the conclusion. Therefore, the fact that Matthew was originally a zealot is not accurate. He was a tax collector and not a zealot. So Matthew was a tax collector before becoming a follower of Jesus and not a zealot. Thank you guys for participating in this discussion with Christianity, and going through the Christianity fact quiz with me. I really recommend you watch my video. I really recommend you watch my video where we learn where I teach you to write a good introduction for a story. Thank you so much I really recommend you watch that video if you enjoyed this one. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you have a very fantastic day, and take care, everybody.